Back with another one. All right, we're still on our little revision series for causes and effects of 20th century war. We're particularly talking about the causes of 20th century wars in this one, and now we're going to focus on the Second World War. In my opinion, I think these last couple videos have been really good at compartmentalizing a lot of these pieces of content for you, and hopefully putting them in nice workable buckets so that you can either use the theses that I gave you or work with your own theses to really help prepare some of, in my opinion, the easiest essays on paper too. Again, we're still in this bullet point right here. For this one particular video, we're going to talk about causes of war: economic, ideological, political, territorial, and other causes. And again, this is for the Second World War. Let me put myself up here really quick. Hello. There we go. Up, up. All right. So, first off, let me just start by saying I'm doing these really quickly. So if you see typos, I apologize. I'm just trying to get these out as quickly as I possibly can. Economic causes of war. I definitely think you have to talk about reparations here, right? I think that's where all of this starts. The reparations are going to lead to that kind of hyperinflation crisis in Germany, which is going to create an avenue for more radical political ideologies to start battling the Weimar government there, right? It was never all that popular, especially in that early 1920s time period. So that economic low point really emphasized the fact that Germany still needed to have more change than it already went through. Then we've got the stock market crash in 1929. That crash is going to mark a decade-long depression. That's going to mark the end of the prosperity that we know of the 1920s. That's going to see a rise in protectionist methods, where countries are now scrambling to protect their own domestic economies. This is going to create a huge gap between the have and the have not countries. And it's going to put countries that are dependent on trade, like Japan and Germany, in a really, really difficult position. And it's going to lead them to both coming up with their expansionist ideologies, right? Again, going back to when we first talked about the 1920s, right? The 1920s is a decade of a lot of trade that led to economic prosperity, which allowed collective security to be the governing ideology of states, right? They thought as a collective, which promoted that peace in the 1920s. Once we see the 193s come into play, we know for a fact that that economic prosperity went away. We know that that trade declined, and countries are going to shift back to self-interest thinking. The same thinking that caused the First World War is going to be the same thinking that caused the Second World War. So I think that is a really easy way to connect both of those wars. They are both happening because countries once again resort to acting in their own self-interest. In World War One, the reason for that self-interest, I think you could say, is economic. And I also think in World War Two, you could say the reason for that self-interest all boils down to economics. The premise of collective security deteriorated as countries resorted to acting in self interest, kind of what I just said. The economic climate led to radical political ideologies emerging, which would lead to polarization of their civilian base, right? I think those are two really workable theses when it comes to the economic causes of war. Political causes, let me do this. All right. The economic climate led to the rise of radical ideologies. So we see the political causes and the economic causes already having overlap here, right? The Germans would see the National Socialists come to power, right? Again, they've been a thing for a while, but that's going to give them their political power, right? The graphs that we studied in class, it is you cannot argue the fact that the Great Depression caused the Nazis to get votes for the first time, or major votes for the first time. In Japan, we see that military takeover that's going to lead to the imperialist state being created. And then in Italy, we see the roots of fascism really take hold. Again, Italy has its own timeline, right? Italy goes through this political polarization after World War II. I think Italy's reasons are a little bit more political in terms of the treaties that they didn't get, but the economy of Italy after World War One, right? The the mutilated victory after World War One, I definitely has that economic and political undertone. They're both really intertwined. The failure to make true and lasting peace after World War One resulted in rising tensions. Again, this is the Treaty of Versailles, and exactly what I just said. This is the Treaty of London, right? The failure to deliver to Italy is what is going to allow fascism to take a hold there. Again, I think that is not arguable. The fluctuation in relationships between the states called for changing alliances. I think this is a really easy thing to kind of fit in to that political word if you see it. We've got the Strasse Front. We've got the Rome-Berlin Pact, the Rome-Berlin Axis. We've got the Pact of Steel. We've got the Nazi-Soviet Pact. We've got the Anglo-German Naval Agreement. We've got the Washington the Washington Naval Treaties. We've got the Four Powers, the Five Powers, the Nine Powers. You've got the Anti-Comintern Pact. There's so many changing alliances in the 20 years from the end of World War One to the beginning of World War Two that I definitely think you can round out this political piece with a nice section on alliances and how those created new tensions or promoted already existing tensions, right? The establishment of the League of Nations and the inherent flaws within that system, right? We talked about that a lot. I know things are capitalized. I'm sorry again. I'm just trying to get this out as quickly as possible. No USSR and no USA are really going to hurt the League of Nations, especially in the early years of it. The mandate system in itself just kind of promoted self-interest of the European powers, and it negated the idea of minorities all around the world, with the Middle East and Africa having these prolonged mandate systems that allowed Europeans to essentially recolonize those areas after World War One without using the word colonization. Um, how economic sanctions would impact larger states. We see that towards the end with Japan, and how economic sanctions is either going to affect them so much that they attack the United States, or not affect them at all and allow them to continue their war machine, right? We see that with Italy and the invasion of Ethiopia and the eventual Hor-Laval Pact. So that's all there as well. And then the council and their own self-interest. I think this is one that needs to be touched upon, right? That in all of these cases, the council is going to have far too much power in the League of Nations, and they're going to do whatever they want. And the moment they need to act in their own self-interest, that's exactly what they're going to do. And that's Manchuria, that's Abyssinia, that's the Rhineland, that's Austria, the list goes on of examples of that. The radical political system that emerged upset the balance of power in Europe, which created tensions, or you could say exacerbated tensions, kind of however you want to phrase that. The ultra nationalist nature of these political ideologies led to the mindset of expansion. I think this is a thesis you could put together and have a really kind of well thought out essay, or you could take them as individual pieces and kind of, I think, again, really have a focused and pointed essay for a paper two topic. Ideological causes, I think this is a big one, right? Just like World War One, again, I think this is a biggie. Extreme ideas that emerged from the economic and political climate of the time led to friction amongst the world powers. Fascism and communism upset the balance of power, more so communism than fascism. We see evidence of that, and how England handled Germany as compared to how England would have handled the Soviets, right? But that power structure created by the Western world is threatened in the 1930s, and we see them acting in certain ways because of it, right? The policy of appeasement, right? Uh, after the Spanish Civil War, we really see that idea entrench itself, and we see Neville Chamberlain do some things that I think are a little bit questionable now that we look back in hindsight. But they did not want another European war, and they're going to act in, I think, kind of ridiculous ways in order to try to prevent that war, right? Fascism in particular was an idea that promoted that conflict, right? The racial superiority complex in Germany is going to give way to their expansionist policies, right? The ideas of social Darwinism and xenophobia are going to come back to the populace. We see that in Japan, we see that in Germany, and the populations are convinced that it's okay to do what the states are about to do. right? This racial ideology, this cultural superiority, kind of however you want to phrase it, is going to lead to those two ideas in Germany, right? The Nazi foreign policies back to last year of Lebensraum and Greater Germany, right? And again, similar mindset is going to establish in Japan. Territorial causes. Now, here I think the territorial causes are all highlighting how all of the other factors are going to mix together. The poor peace treaties, right, that we talked about in political causes a few seconds ago, are going to create poor borders, like poor countries that have minorities in the same state as majorities that have been in ethnic conflicts for hundreds of years. And that's going to be kind of propelled by that mandate system, especially in the Middle East, where the British go in and draw countries like Syria and Iraq and all that stuff that again we talked about that has unfortunately major prominence in today's society, right? The German policy of Greater Germany, right? That wouldn't be a thing if they didn't put ethnic blooded Germans in states that are not ruled by ethnic blooded Germans, right? This is one of Woodrow Wilson's 14 points that you shouldn't draw borders, or you should draw borders based on ethnicity, and they didn't do that in the actual peace treaties. So we see these territorial claims, these territorial wants and needs really start to come into the mix here, and I think heighten a lot of these other tensions, right? And again, we see the economic climate, right? So that economic climate is going to cause some of these reliant or dependent nations to go and seek more, right? We see this in Manchuria, and we see this in Ethiopia. Military causes. Again, I think this is another really big one. I think this is another easy essay to kind of formulate. Disarmament treaties can also be mentioned in political causes, promoting self interest and creating situations where armies, should say armies, still had offensive and threatening capabilities, right? Again, disarmament is the project in the 1920s that you've got all year to complete, and no one's actually going to take seriously until it's too late, right? The year turns into the 193s, and everyone goes, oh man, we never disarmed from World War One. I mean, yeah, we disarmed from World War One, but we never actually made it a thing. And now we've got technologies that are running rampant again, and we see the idea, the semblance of an arms race kind of coming back into the culture of Europe leading up to the Second World War and eventually and through the beginning of the Second World War. I think the failure of the Washington Treaty system is really important to mention here. All right. The remilitarization of Germany highlighted British self-interest. So again, this links to a lot of other things that we talked about. The signing of the Anglo-German Naval Agreement promoted British trade in Germany, and it also said that fascism isn't our biggest enemy, communism is. And if we've got a poor economic Germany, we can't have them turning communism. So we are going to boost that economy of Germany by giving them jobs in the military and also jobs in factories making their navy, right? Japan invading Manchuria was a clear-cut sign of aggression, and the League of Nations didn't really give them appropriate repercussions for doing that, right? It was a slap on the wrist, and Japan just leaves. That's going to set the precursor for things to come. Italy invading Ethiopia with tanks and chemical weapons, again, shows how advanced these military tactics are going to be, and I think again foreshadow the problems. And then ultimately all that comes to a boiling point with Guernica, and we see planes level a city for the first time, and that's going to entrench us in that idea of appeasement, but also set that tone that this next war is going to be a disaster because it's going to be fought in cities and a lot of civilians are going to die, right? So I think all of these themes are easy to put in to some of these broader essays, right? The other here, this is one that I really like for World War II. If you're comparing and contrasting World War I and World War II, I think this is the major contradiction, right? We've done this in class before. The two contradictions between why World War I broke out, why World War II broke out compared to World War I is that economic depression, right? There was not that economic downturn in World War I like there was World War II. And I think the other one is great man history, right? That we've got the individuals that are going to drive this conflict forward. And we've got the Stalins, the Hitlers, the Roosevelts, the Churchills, the Chamberlains, and the Mussolinis, right? And that great man idea, that individual idea, their own self-interest, their own ideology is going to drive that conflict to the breaking point, right? I hope this video helped. I really liked this video. I thought this was a really good review of World War II, and I think it puts it in a nice frame to compare it back to World War One. Again, I hope these are helping. Let me know. I'm not trying to sound like a YouTuber, so don't make fun of me for it. But let me know in the comments if these videos are being effective, if I should change some things up and do them a little bit differently. I plan on releasing the last part of this, the short and long term causes of World War II. Probably by the end of the day today, and then I'm going to move on to possibly the Cold War as a paper 2 topic. We'll see how that goes. Let me know. Again, hope they help.